Well, I think we're going to see a lot of results. We've already seen them on the border. We have the best border in the history of our country. It was 99.999.
What?
And nobody ever thought that was possible. In fact, Biden, if you remember, said he has to get legislation. And I said, no, you just need a new president. And I guess I was right. We have the best border we've ever had.
We have the best border in the history of our country. I don't even know what a good border is. 99.999. What are we even dealing with when we allow someone to speak utter gibberish and we give them a pass just because they won the presidency?
So, they talk about your next question will be due process, but they talk about due process, but do you get due process when you're here illegally?
The reason Biden wanted legislation to deal with the border is because he wanted to do it legally. And Trump is doing it illegally, which means that he cares nothing for Congress or for due process. He just sees his role as removing what he calls illegals. And people coming across the border and seeking asylum are not illegal. There is a legal process which Trump is refusing them the opportunity to access. So this whole thing is just ethnic cleansing, basically.
Is this now your economy, sir?
Well, I think certain aspects of it are. We lost $5 to $6 billion a day with Biden. $5 to $6 billion. And I've got that down to a great number right now in a record time. We're talking about 100 days. But just think of what that is. $5 billion a day we're losing on trade. And we were very tough with China, as you know. We put 145% tariff on. Nobody's ever heard of such a thing.
We were not losing $5 billion a day under Joe Biden. It is simply a lie. Sadly, the reporter just allows him to spew these lies with no pushback. He doesn't understand how international trade works. Therefore, he thinks that a trade deficit is a loss. It is not a loss. These are different countries with different economies. They don't all have an economy as huge as the United States, and therefore they're not able to buy at the rate that we are. We have great buying power. You only buy within your budget. Trump has a completely skewed view of the world, which unfortunately is turning the economies of every other country on their heads just because he doesn't understand the very simple and basic rules of international trade. And again, it's like the elephant in the room. The whole world is having to be turned on its head because he doesn't get it. It's such a shame that, there aren't more leaders who are able to step up and make it absolutely clear that Trump is a fool, that Trump really has no intellect on this or any subject. But we're certainly not hearing it from Republicans. We're not hearing enough from Democrats, certainly, but world leaders would be best to come together to make this point. Unfortunately, they know that they are dealing with a madman. And in the same way that, by goading Trump and by highlighting his inadequacies, he is likely to seek retribution on those countries specifically. This is the worst-kept secret in the world, that world leaders are having to tread on eggshells, literally, around this guy. His insecurity and his ego is such that if you hold him to account, he will simply punish you. And that is the mark of an authoritarian.
Oil prices, did you see gasoline is now below, in many cases, in many states, below $2 a gallon, $1.98, $1.99, $1.97?
Well, my question, sir, is when the stock market spiked, you said this is the Trump effect. When the numbers weren't so good earlier this week, you said it's the Biden effect. Are you only taking ownership of the good numbers and not the bad numbers?
Firstly, gasoline is not down to $1.90 something a gallon. It just isn't. It's simply a lie. And Donald Trump, he, because of the way he is wired, he has never been held to account in his life. So therefore, he's been able to say anything and there's never been any pushback. Yes, I have the tallest building in Manhattan or whatever. He just says whatever he wants. And that's why when legal cases are brought towards him, he says, I am the most persecuted. If he didn't tell lies, if he didn't break the law, if he wasn't a total fraud, then there wouldn't be any legal cases against him. He thinks it's a surprise that there are no other presidents that have been treated like this. No other presidents have behaved like this. And again, this is a point that doesn't seem to be made often enough, especially to his face.
I didn't even know anything about what were you talking about. Egg prices were so high you couldn't buy eggs. They didn't have any eggs. And they said Easter is going to be a disaster. Well, we had Easter at the White House, and we had thousands of eggs, and they were down 87%.
And then to claim that the price of eggs is right down, so much so that we had enough to roll at the White House on Easter? I mean, what is he talking about? We are dealing with a child, a man-child. He's not even bothering to pretend to be presidential anymore. It's as if, I hate to put it all down to dementia, because it isn't. He's always been like this. But he seems to be even less aware of how ridiculous he sounds. I suppose back in the 80s, he had a slightly better sense of how he was perceived, and so he could only lie so much before it, got into kind of dangerous territory. Now he has zero self-awareness. So he'll literally say that eggs must be down because we had enough to roll at the Easter event at the White House. Eggs are still $7, $8, and $9 for a dozen. Now, Trump has never bought eggs. This is not a subject that he really even connects with or cares about, unless, of course, you're talking about an Egg McMuffin.
When does it become the Trump economy?
It partially is right now, and I really mean this. I think the good parts are the Trump economy, and the bad parts are the Biden economy.
Okay, rewind. The good parts of the economy are the Trump economy, and the bad bits are the Biden economy? Again, who does he think he's talking to? He must think that everybody is as stupid as he is. Trump took this economy in January and has literally flushed it down the toilet. Not just the US economy, but economies around the world. People are scrambling to avoid recession. Trump is one of these people that thinks that if he squints, something isn't kind of real. He can dispel reality by squinting. Maybe that's why he kind of looks like that all the time, because he's trying to see the world through Trump-tinted spectacles.
No, I think the tariffs are going to be great for us because it's going to make us rich.
But you said some dolls are going to cost more. Isn't that an acknowledgement that some prices will go up?
I don't think a beautiful baby girl that's 11 years old needs to have 30 dolls. I think they can have 3 dolls or 4 dolls.
And now these analogies to do with dolls and kids' toys, firstly referring to a 12-year-old girl as a beautiful baby, I find a little bit weird. But beyond that, Trump is now starting to dictate what toys kids can play with and how many they are allowed to have. The reporter thinks that he's speaking metaphorically, talking about toys generally or retail or products that have, been imported from China or wherever. Trump now is dictating what kind of possessions are acceptable in order to make his economy work. And that, you might have to have a few less dolls. It's just so weird. A, that he's choosing dolls to reference, but B, that he thinks that this is okay, that this is normal, because effectively he's asking people to ration. And in the consumerist capitalist country that is America, everything that Trump stands for, basically, he's now talking in terms of a kind of wartime economy. It doesn't make any sense.
I'm just saying they don't need to have 30 dolls. They can have 3. They don't need to have 250 pencils. They can have 5.
But you're basically saying there could be some supply shortages because of the tariff.
We don't have to waste money on a trade deficit with China for things we don't need, for junk that we don't need.
Yeah, we don't really need 30 dolls. We don't really need eggs. We could just use powdered eggs, or we don't need milk. We could use powdered milk, or we don't need coffee anymore. How many coffees do you even have a day? What, you have more than 3? Well, that's just junk. It's just you don't need that junk in you. Just go without coffee. Is it 2025 or is it 1945? We're dealing with somebody who is contradicting his own view of economics. if indeed he has one at all.
This is such a dishonest interview already. Prices are down on groceries. Prices are down for oil. Prices are down for all energy. Prices are down at tremendous numbers.
He's so disinterested in all this stuff. It's not as if he even has any skin in the game. He just doesn't care. He knows that he is rich enough to have 30 dolls and more, and that's all that matters. He doesn't think about people, individuals, small businesses, the people that voted for him, basically. You know, we're starting to discover that Trump has utter contempt for anybody who is not a billionaire or somebody who runs a blue chip or kind of international company. These are the only people he cares for.
You campaigned on a promise to bring prices down on day
Well, I don't know. When
one.
you say strollers are going up, what kind of a thing? I'm saying that gasoline is going down. Gasoline is thousands of times more important than a stroller someplace.
But what do you say to Americans who say they voted for you because they want and they need relief right now?
And they're getting it.
Trump knows what gas is, but he doesn't really know what strollers are. So he sees the value of gas because he sees how much the energy companies profit from gas. It might sound crazy that we're trying to analyze insanity, but this is the president of the United States denying that strollers have any use because they're of no use to him.
Right now, what about those
even mortgage rates?
different items I just
mortgage
mentioned?
rates are going down, despite the fact that we have a stubborn Fed.
But you said even dolls could cost a couple bucks more.
Maybe they might, but you don't need to have, as I said, $35. You can have 2, 3, 4. And save a lot of money. We don't need to feed the beast.
This particular beast has been well fed.
So small businesses say they are being hurt by the Chinese tariffs and some could be forced to shut
And
down.
many businesses are being helped.
Are you
Look at the
considering
automobile
tariff
business.
relief for small businesses?
Why do you always mention that, you pick up a couple of little businesses? What about the car business? They're going to make a fortune because of the tariffs.
Trump is proving time and time again that he has no interest in small or medium-sized businesses. He really only cares for these large companies that generate great profits for the people that he knows and plays golf with. And we're starting to see, not that we didn't always know, that this guy really has no connection to the very people who voted for him, the people who work regular jobs, the people who gave their last dime to support him, buying his merchandise, showing up to his rallies, and giving him the kind of worship that he so wanted. And what are they getting in return? That he really is shitting all over his base. And obviously there will always be people that are obsessed with Donald Trump, who are mentally in a coercive relationship with a narcissist, and so they just cannot break free. He is kind of using up that oxygen supply. But for everybody else, independents, people who are on the fence, people who voted for him because they thought he'd be good on the economy, Trump really is no economist. He's no businessman. He's just a selfish real estate guy who never really had any success until he got cast in a TV show.
Is it okay in the short term to have a recession?
This. Look, everything's okay. What we are, I said, this is a transition period. I think we're going to do fantastically.
He really doesn't seem to care if the US goes into recession or not. And the reason he doesn't care is because he can afford to weather the recession. And anybody who has money can weather a recession. They're not living hand to mouth. They're not living paycheck to paycheck.
I think we're going to have an economy the likes of which we've never had before.
Again, this is just exposing his failure to understand the common man, the working class American. He just has no connection with that group whatsoever. And this is the problem of being a Nepo baby. This is the problem of being born into wealth, is that you never really have empathy.
There's no question about it. The election was rigged. The facts are in, and it's still being litigated. Let's go.
You did take your case to court more than 60 times and didn't win those cases.
I won a lot of court cases.
Just to button that up, though, sir. Just to button that up.
What are you talking about?
How
the election
worried are you?
Are we talking about the election
Let's
of
talk about
2020?
here and now. Let's talk about
the
here and
election
now.
of 2020?
He just can't let it lie. He is convinced that he won the 2020 election and that it was rigged in some way, despite losing over 60 legal cases. The fact that he's kind of pushing it and trying to push that narrative still on this NBC interview is proof to me that he is trying to rewrite history. And if he says it enough times, then people will start to think that it's true. The struggle is real. He knows that it works. He knows that this kind of Hitler-esque form of propaganda is actually quite easy to achieve. And so any opportunity to get on television to a mainstream show and to push the narrative that the 2020 election was stolen from him, that's what he's going to do.
What people don't understand is, and this is a lot, the country eats the tariff. The company eats the tariff.
The country eats the tariff, or the company eats the tariff? I mean, who's eating? Why is anyone eating tariffs? This is like the worst kept secret in the world, that Trump doesn't understand who pays the tariff. Now, it is absolutely clear to anybody who is actually involved in imports and exports that if you are importing something from China, if there's a tariff on it, the paperwork is done at the dockside when it is imported. It is paid for by the importer. Trump doesn't get that. Obviously, he's never been to the dockside. He's never really been anywhere where his hands are required to get dirty. And so to him, it's just a fantasy. And trying to push this false narrative that it's other countries that are paying the tariffs. Like how? Because they're not going to write a check when they send goods. It's the biggest story in America right now, the fact that Trump doesn't understand how tariffs work. And no one seems to be covering it like that.
What did you say to Jeff Bezos?
He's just a very nice guy. We have a relationship. I asked him about it. He said, well, I don't want to do that. And he took it off immediately.
So he changed course. And will you take that same tactic with other CEOs if you
I'll
feel
always
like
call people if I disagree with them. If I think that somebody's doing something that's incorrect, wrong, or maybe hurtful to the country, I'll call. Absolutely. Wouldn't you want me to call? Biden wouldn't call because he didn't know what was happening, but I do.
Biden didn't call CEOs to make them change course because Biden wasn't a dictator. It's as simple as that, really. You need to stay out of private businesses. And to say that, you and Jeff Bezos have a relationship because you've met him a handful of times and he answers the phone to you. I mean, that really is proof of how few friends Donald Trump really has. He doesn't know what a relationship is. I mean, he thinks he has a relationship with Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, and yet none of them will take his calls either. So, again, we're talking about someone who is really lonely, clearly a very isolated and lonely man who is having to lie about his friendship with Jeff Bezos in order to look like he is in with the in crowd.
Are you looking for a new Secretary of Defense?
No,
President?
not even a little bit. No. Pete's going to be great.
His job is safe right now?
We're doing a fantastic job against the Houthis who like blowing ships up and watching them sink in the ocean. We're hitting him very hard. No, he's doing a very good job.
His job is safe right now?
Totally safe.
Everybody knows that Pete Hegseth is a disaster for the Pentagon and the U.S. military. Everybody knows that. And Donald Trump, by saying that he's safe and that he's not going to punish him for Signalgate and any of this stuff, is just, again, exposing that Donald Trump has no ability to lead. He doesn't understand what's at stake, what the consequences are, doesn't care for national security. This is why employing people like Pete Hegseth, sycophants who are unsuitable and underqualified, their only reason for being given that job is because they suck up to Donald Trump. And obviously no senior military person is going to do that. So you have to go to a Fox News weekend host who served briefly in the military and think that he is good enough to be Secretary of Defense. I mean, it is laughable. The world is laughing. But the world is also now a lot less safe because of it.
The big emergency right now is that we have thousands of people that we want to take out, and we have some judges that want everybody to go to
Some
court.
of them you appointed, sir, including
That's all right.
3 on the Supreme Court.
They change. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how that happens, but they do change.
Just to button this up, though, are you planning to lift that emergency order anytime soon? Now that the border's secure?
We have an emergency. We have a massive emergency overall. It's an overall emergency on immigration. And if the courts don't allow us to take people out, if we had to have a court case, think of it, every single person, we have millions of people. We're going to have millions of court cases. Figure 2 weeks a court case. It would be 300 years.
Are you defying the Supreme Court, sir?
No, I'm relying on the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, who's very capable, doing a great job, because I'm not involved in the legality or the illegality. I have lawyers to do that. And that's why I have a great DOJ. We have a great one. We had a very corrupt one before. Now we have a great one. And they're not viewing the decision the way you said it. They don't view it that way at all. They think it's a totally different decision.
Well, you say you have the power to bring them back, though. Your attorney general says, quote, that's up to El Salvador. Just to put a fine point on this, do you have the power to bring Abrego Garcia back as the Supreme Court?
Well, I have the power to ask for him to come back if I'm instructed by the Attorney General that it's legal to do so.
Trump's very proud of himself that he's managed to work out that if you had a court case for every person that he wanted to take out, as he describes, ironically, that it would last for 300 years. Well, firstly, no one's talking about court cases. I mean, he's obviously used to being in court for a week or two at a time because such is the complexity of all of his crimes. But to be up in front of an immigration judge takes 5 minutes. And, Biden was trying to invest in immigration judges. That was the bipartisan immigration bill that Trump vetoed even before he got back into office, because he didn't want to give Biden a win at the border. Everybody deserves due process. That is the law. That is what the Constitution says. And that is effectively what the Supreme Court say. And the fact that Donald Trump is denying that, is complaining that he doesn't want people to have legal representation and an opportunity to have their cases heard, is authoritarian dictatorship stuff. That's what it is. And we really need to call it out for what it is. And the fact that he's kind of pretending to be a bit confused as to why this is happening and saying it's going to take 300 years, it isn't.
I don't know much about this gentleman other than I hear he's an absolute not good person. And I have very capable legal people, John Sauer, as you know, and all top people. And I have to rely on that to interpret whatever's said by the Supreme Court.
The corruption is now. The corruption is Pam Bondi. The corruption is the fact that she's going on Fox News all the time saying how wonderful Donald Trump is and how she'll do anything for Donald Trump. And she is singing exactly off of Donald Trump's hymn sheet. The playbook of the authoritarian, the playbook of the xenophobe, the playbook of this racist view of the world. To claim that this is not a corrupt Department of Justice is just jokes. I mean, nobody buys into this. Of course, there's no pushback from the reporter on this. There are plenty of opportunities to expose the fact that Pam Bondi is basically just in the tank for Donald Trump. That is not how it was with Joe Biden. I mean, if it was, then Donald Trump probably be imprisoned by now. But the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, didn't want to give the impression that he was doing anything to favor Democrats. We are really living in the twilight zone when it comes to the rule of law. And Trump is the problem. Trump only sees the world through a criminal lens, because that's who he is.
Your Secretary of State says everyone who's here, citizens and non-citizens, deserve due process. Do you agree, Mr. President?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know.
Well, the Fifth Amendment says
I don't know. It seems it might say that, but if you're talking about that, then we'd have to have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million trials. We have thousands of people that are some murderers and some drug dealers and some of the worst people on earth. But some of the worst, most dangerous people on earth. And I was elected to get them the hell out of here, and the courts are holding me from doing it.
Trump doesn't care for Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He, blame the lawyers, blame somebody else. At the end of the day, Trump just sees him as another brown person, and therefore he is of no value.
But even given those numbers that you're talking about, don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me, and they are going to obviously follow what the Supreme Court said. What you said is not what I heard the Supreme Court said. They have a different interpretation.
So let's just pause for a second and be clear. He's being asked, the President of the United States is being asked if he should uphold the Constitution of the United States, for which he swore an oath to uphold at his inauguration, even though his hand wasn't actually on the Bible. And now his answer is, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. I mean, this is basic civics. This doesn't require a law degree. This requires you to actually care about due process and the rule of law. But again, Trump just deflects and says, I was elected to get these people out, and so that's what I'm going to do, and I don't care if the courts stand in my way. This is lawlessness. And yet there is nobody really, apart from the legal cases that are being brought independently, to stand up to Trump. Trump has no line manager. There really is nobody to hold him to account. And that is why we are in a constitutional crisis. That is why we have crossed into a very dark place, arguably a place of no return, as long as MAGA Republicans remain in office, that the rule of law is over, that we are not coming back from this. And anybody thinks that the pendulum will just swing back the other way and everything will go back to how it used to be is truly deceived. This is Donald Trump realigning America with some of the worst countries on the planet when it comes to exercising your democratic right to a fair trial, to be innocent until proven guilty, and to uphold the law of the land. Those days are over.
Should lawful residents of this country start carrying paperwork with them when they leave their homes?
I don't think that'll be necessary, but what you're not saying is that many people have been killed, maimed, badly hurt by illegal immigrants that came over that are from prisons and from jails and from mental institutions, and they're hurting our people. And if we don't get them out, we're not going to have a country for long.
This narrative that people are coming from other countries and maiming and raping and murdering is just factually wrong. Immigrants are not doing the majority of crimes. The crime is homegrown. The crime, especially violent crime, is invariably from, white male Americans. That's how it is. And this xenophobia that, creating this image of the other, no different to what Hitler did talking about Jews and minorities in Nazi Germany, is creating this fear of the other and then using that fear to be able to announce emergency measures, as Trump has called this national emergency, and then to start to segregate people, to deport people, to send people to internment camps, no matter whether they have paperwork or not, and without due process. That's what all this is about. It is simply history repeating itself. And, it's so frustrating that the media is not drawing the comparison with Nazis, because what we're seeing here is the rise of Nazism. This is simply the same thing, just as it's famously been said, wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross.
Every question is asked in a negative vein. There's a toy company that took a toddler's, whatever, but you don't talk about the fact that gasoline is down at numbers that nobody believes.
I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Love this video? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch and help us blow past 1 million followers.